Now, we know that endometrial cancer is predominantly a disease which is postmenopausal, but surveys have shown that 4%, anything between 4 to 4.5% is the incidence of endometrial cancer in women less than 40 years of age. The next slide. But we have to think before we start talking about the management. Now, what are the risks of fertility preservation? Definitely there are risks. What is the oncologic efficacy in terms of, are we going to deny optimal treatment for this patient? Have we ruled out any undetected advanced disease? What about undetected extrauterine disease, which is more than grade 1? We do know that 25% of these women can actually have an undetected synchronous ovarian carcinoma. And are they part of this Lynch syndrome? Have we had an opportunity to do molecular screening of the tumor tissue? It may not have been possible. Next slide. So we have to be very careful when we select our patients. So what are the patients, or who are the patients who will qualify for this? It definitely has to be a well-differentiated, that is a grade 1 endometrial adenocarcinoma. The pathology should be, and the grading should be confirmed by curettage, and I will mention a little later why the word curettage. Tumor should be confined to the endometrium, and woman should belong to the reproductive age group. And does she have a desire for future childbearing? We cannot presume that they will want a child in the future. We have to discuss this also with them. There should be no contraindication to hormonal therapy. And the most important point, patient and the family should be aware and accept that what we are offering is not standard care. It's a non-standard nature of treatment. There is always a risk of occult carcinoma, which may remain occult and surface at any time. And at the end of what we may call successful treatment, there may still be risk of recurrence. There may still be persistent carcinoma. Right. So extremely important before we start any form of treatment is counseling. Now, we know, and I'm sure most of our patients know, that surgical staging, which includes a total abdominal hysterectomy, BSO, or whether you're going for a laparoscopic procedure, a total hysterectomy with BSO is the standard of care. So when we are going for conservative management, there is a deviation from standard recommendation. So we have to again ask the couple and family to consider and reconsider their desire for fertility. There may be undetected additional oncologic risks, as I said earlier, which has to be highlighted. Uncertainty about future reproductive outcome. We may successfully treat conservatively. The woman or the couple may still not be able to conceive. So we are not guaranteeing reproduction, successful reproduction at the end of our treatment. And sometimes there is something called a post-treatment regret, when in spite of successful treatment, in spite of no residual or persistent disease, the couple then feel, oh, maybe I should have just undergone proper treatment anyway. So we have to have all this in place before we start. So once we have made a decision to start, as with any other procedure, there is always a pre-treatment evaluation. Definitely history, physical examination, but the mainstay is endometrial sampling and imaging. Imaging by way of an ultrasound, definitely a transvaginal ultrasound scan to look at endometrial thickness, and a magnetic resonance imaging to look for myometrial invasion. Next. So the key factors in decision making, as we said earlier again, and I'm repeatedly saying this because we have to be very sure on what we are going to do. The stage of the disease, the pathology, the grade, the depth of myometrial invasion. Is there any loco-regional disease spread? And do we have any metastatic lymph nodes? So the combination of endometrial sampling and imaging is going to give us the answer to these questions that we have to ask in our mind. Next slide. So how do we do the endometrial sampling? Now, many of us now have moved away from the proverbial dilatation and curettage to the outpatient endometrial biopsy. But studies and pathologic correlation has shown that in this particular instance, a dilatation and curettage or a hysteroscopy curettage is of very, very utmost importance, because an outpatient endometrial biopsy, though it has a 99.6% sensitivity in the postmenopausal women, in premenopausal women, it's 91%. And there is a high chance of the focal disease being missed. So a DNC has been shown in studies to be more thorough. The rate of residual disease is lower when we have done a hysterectomy specimen and looked at the pathology. And the upgrade in pathology, when we're talking of outpatient endometrial biopsy, which is 17.4%, is only 8.7% for the DNC. So clearly, a dilatation and curettage has a place in this particular situation. Next slide. So the next modality which is going to help us to decide is imaging. And as I said, a transvaginal ultrasound with a 3D reconstruction done properly can give us a very good idea of focal disease. It can also tell us about myometrial invasion, but definitely an MRI will give us little more information in terms of cervical extension, where you have the sensitivity of 89%, specificity of 100%. And if enlarged lymph nodes are reported on ultrasound, MRI could show nodes with central necrosis, which may suggest metastatic disease. So we are definitely getting more information. And with compared to CT, MRI is better for giving us information regarding deep myometrial invasion. Next slide. So the goal of therapy now, having got all the information, is striking a balance. We have decided consciously to retain the uterus and ovaries. We have ensured that the presence of early stage low-grade disease. At the same time, we are hoping that we can prevent progression of the disease. Next slide. So what are the management options that are available? I would again like to stress the fact that counseling is extremely important. We then have this option of medical management, and you can add as many question marks as you want before conservative surgery, because there is really no place for a traditional conservative surgery. Now, the treatment, as we said earlier, and we have discussed all this, is TAHBSO. So we will go on now to the medical management. Next slide. The medical management consists of progestin therapy. There are some reports of GnRH analogs being used, aromatase inhibitors being used, and a few reports of hysteroscopic resection of the endometrium prior to progestin therapy. Next slide. So what are the different progestins that we use? We have medroxyprogesterone acetate and megestrol acetate, usually given orally, and also progestinogens can be used in an intrauterine system. Next slide. So the aim of any treatment always is the lowest effective dose. And across the board, it has been found that MPA has a 10 milligram is the lowest effective dose, and megestrol acetate is 160 milligrams. It can, but this is not the dosage schedule that we will use. It will be individualized. Continuous versus cyclical, as in 2 weeks of treatment and 2 weeks break, can also be given. But generally, a continuous treatment is what is preferred, because we have an endpoint and we want to get on with the next stage of treatment. So we don't want to prolong the treatment for too long. And we have a number of meta-analysis and data that are available. Next slide. So medroxyprogesterone, the dosage ranges, as you know, from 2.5 to 1,500 milligrams is the dosage, and commonly used is about 600 milligrams per day. And here they have found that at the 600 milligrams per day, at 26 weeks, when they evaluated 22 patients, 56% had a complete response, whereas recurrence was seen 47%. At 3 years, they had 12 pregnancies in this group, and they reported weight gain and liver dysfunction as the side effects. Megestrol acetate, again, is available, though we all are more familiar with medroxyprogesterone. Again, used roughly 160 milligrams per day is the commonly used dosage. The other progestin that can be used is the levonorgestrel intrauterine system, releasing 20 micrograms per day. We have insufficient data of its use in endometrial carcinoma, but we do know that in endometrial hyperplasia, we get very good response with the LNG intrauterine system. So there is a role for using LNG intrauterine system when combined with oral MPA or with megestrol acetate. Next slide. So this is the meta-analysis. Don't go through too much in detail, except to say that look at the numbers. We have 25 studies, 445 patients, 45 studies, 280. So yes, there are numbers, but then I don't think it's a robust evidence to tell us that this is the way forward, or even to put together a general set of recommendations, because you can see the wide variation in the pregnancy rate, the variation in the relapse rate, and even in the complete response rate. Next slide. So why do you think there has been this variation? There are some pitfalls, because some have used MPA, some have used megestrol acetate, some have combined it with endometrial resection. The dose has varied between studies. The time to response has not been recorded in all the studies. And sometimes there has not been that differentiation between endometrial hyperplasia and endometrial cancer. A few cases have reported synchronous ovarian carcinoma, and following treatment, disease was upgraded to stage 1 and more in a few cases. So all these could have influenced or biased the outcome of these studies, or our own interpretation may be biased. Next slide. So we really need more information before we can say this is the way forward. How do we choose what to use and what is the dose? We have to balance the efficacy of the progestin that we are using with the toxicity. And we do know that we have to ask for, thrombus formation history, mood alterations, headache, weight gain, breast pain and tenderness, which can be quite distressing. So here again, they found that it is not dose related. In one prospective trial, they found that medroxyprogesterone acetate 200 milligrams per day was actually more effective than 1000 milligrams. So it's not an inversely proportional that you increase the dose and you will get better efficacy. So you have to individualize and see the response before you proceed. Next slide. So treatment regimen is usually, again, I keep putting these breaks in between, I know, because we have to be convinced about the need for conservative treatment before we proceed, both the doctor and the patient. So what we would use is either medroxyprogesterone acetate or megestrol acetate, with or without LNG intrauterine system. Now, some reports are there of hysteroscopic resection of the endometrium playing a very small role in the management, either as prior to starting hormonal therapy. Sometimes you may be giving a suboptimal dose, or there may be a failure to respond, in which case you can reassess, review, do a hysteroscopic resection, and then continue the treatment. And then using hysteroscopy itself, many would question a theoretical risk of dissemination, but this has been shown time and again not to be significant. So what is the time interval to response? Anything between 8 weeks and 9 months. 9 months. So when we do a follow-up, we have to do an outpatient endometrial biopsy after 3 months. We need to know whether our patient is responding or not. We need at least 2 negative biopsies at least 12 weeks apart, before we can say that our treatment has been successful. And sometimes we may opt to leave the intrauterine system in place if we have put it in, because the couple may not want to plan pregnancy immediately, or certain risk factors like obesity may persist, where you would want to allow some time for the lifestyle changes and the weight reduction to take place before you start the treatment. Next slide. So when we are looking at predictors for response, most logical thing to look at would be the endometrial thickness. So after 8 weeks of treatment, if we have a 6 to 7 millimeter endometrium on a transvaginal scan, then we are definitely going on the right track. Younger age at diagnosis, better. Prior pregnancy, if the woman has had, definitely better. What are her other infertility factors? We have to keep that in mind as well. For example, simple things like even a PCO, anovulation. So what is it that would also add to the so-called comorbid factors? BMI, again, they have found has no correlation to the response of the woman to the treatment that we are giving. Next slide. So when we define response, we are talking about complete response and partial response. Complete response is absence of any hyperplastic or cancerous tissue, which may be a hypothetical situation, but we can only try to prove it. Partial response, residual lesion with degeneration and atrophy of the endometrial glands. Next slide. So how do we follow up? Once we have done this, persistence of disease at 3 months, that means we have to go for pathologic evidence. We need that. We can increase the dose of progestin, or we can repeat the outpatient biopsy, endometrial biopsy after 3 months, and then again review the response to treatment. If you have persistence of disease at 12 months, that is a warning signal to abandon conservative treatment. And definitely sit down, talk to the couple, and plan a hysterectomy. We have to definitely consider ovarian preservation, oocyte retrieval, and surrogacy. But these are things that have to be individualized and discussed with each couple. Next slide. And the successful treatment does not equal good pregnancy rates is very, very important. That is something we have to talk to the woman right from the beginning. The presence of obesity, PCOS, chronic anovulation, etc. may have been there in the beginning, may have been responsible for the problem, and may continue to be there even after what we would call successful treatment. So ART actually may be required for these patients. And this is a picture of the god of fertility at Yangon in Burma, where you can see that they offer lotus to this god. Many people come and offer lotus flower, hoping that they would conceive and get pregnant. Next slide. So the sum up again, sure, we have to be sure of our diagnosis. We have to be sure of our stage, the pathology, and the grade. Other comorbid factors we have to consider and counsel the patient. The desire to have a child has to be repeatedly discussed. Couple and family should fully understand the treatment process and its long-term sequelae. Very stringent and regular follow-up, and most important, as with any procedure in our medical practice, know when to abandon the procedure.